Chapter 23. The God-Spake voice. If thy voice becomes single, thy whole body shall be full of light, is not a stupid distorting or rearranging of words, but a revelation from the Spirit. When we read that God spake, we find it came to pass, or it was done. Man speaks in either the past or the future. He either tells what happened to him or what he wishes or thinks will happen to him. He cannot say with any authority that his prayer shall be answered. He can only preface his remarks with something in the nature of, if it be the will of God, or God willing, which is only a cover for his fear or knowledge that his word has no power. Talking of and about God only causes an emotional disturbance at best. Deep, powerful revelation is not measured by the strength of the vocal cords, nor by excess motion of the physical body. Great show and pomp in worship of God is no indication of understanding. Talking of God through the so-called human voice, we see a variety of gods with a variety of powers. A millionaire conceives of God as wealthy, quite naturally. A poor man's idea of the same God is functioning degrees below in a concept of wealth which the millionaire would call small change. Yet the law states there is but one God, and until this wholeness or oneness is understood or seen, man will go on taking a measure of God out and calling it all, as a bucket of water from the ocean might be called the ocean. As man examines into the bucket of water which he designates as ocean, he begins to see the limitations and the narrow confines of his claim. Anything he finds out about this ocean would have to come under the limitations of the measure in which he holds the water. So is it with man and life. Separated from the universal, he begins to measure life by the narrow limits of a personality which he believes to contain life. It is true, he does contain life and is contained in life. But when he stops it down to the personality, he can only find in life what his measure has to give. Like little monkeys. So with the voice which speaks the knowledge which it finds within itself. It speaks of itself, and it speaks a lie in the generally accepted sense of the word, for it is speaking of a limitation. It speaks of life as circumscribed in the parentheses, health and sickness. It speaks of the riches of spirit as circumscribed in the parentheses of riches and poverty. All of these limitations are found in the personality and never in God. All the stated limitations in the voice lie in the voice of man separated from the God-Spake voice. The man voice, speaking from what it finds to be true of itself, can say, I can run a mile and then I am tired. Or, I can spend $1,000 a month and then I am finished financially. But it can never speak with authority because it speaks of itself. Trying to bring all the activity of the God power into the little narrow confines of John Smith is as ridiculous as imagining that a whale could live in a small amount of water taken from the ocean. It is true that the whale does live in such a medium, but the limitation of that medium precludes the possibility of his doing it. It is just as impossible for the riches of spirit to express in a place so small and limited as John Smith's self-consciousness. All that the Father hath is mine is true in more ways than one, but using this in the grandest dimensions. The universal idea of riches. We see the utter folly of a little personality with an idea of prosperity placed at the $10,000 limit, making this glorious thing come true. All is a great deal more than the limitations of the greatest financially minded person who ever existed. Trying to coax, convert, or change this glorious God principle to suit the purposes of a person, to glorify a little personality and make a demigod of man, is as futile and as fruitless as waiting for rain from the clouds without rain. As man begins to understand and see something of the wholeness of life, he will lose his life and thereby find life. All that the Father, your concept of the Father, hath is yours. And that is why, even in a limited sense of things, we see people manifesting health which they apparently know nothing about, or a certain freedom of money. Their personally circumscribed Father has just a certain all which they have a right to. No wonder the voice says over and over, be still and know that I am God. And do not confuse this with the little human voice which speaks of its own needs and wants. The voice of man, when given the least opportunity, begins to tell what it wants to happen, or what it needs, or what it is trying to demonstrate. It is filled with the limitations of its own mentality. The voice, the God-Spake voice, speaks of itself. It speaks from the vast reaches of spirit and knows that before they ask, it is already done. The God-Spake voice is merely the calling into being of something that already is. It does not speak from the limitation of the human mentality, but it speaks the word without thought or wonder or guessing or explanation. And the word thus spoken or thus recognized embodies itself in a glorious manifestation. It is true that the egg may have within it the full capacity of becoming an eagle. If it could record its feelings, it might know within itself that it could scale the great heights and float about over the mountaintops with abandon. But how futile it would be to imagine that as long as it remained egg, it would ever be able to accomplish this. It is true, it might be catapulted through the air and for a brief instant experience the feel of something within its soul. But what about the end of that flight? Walter. It is impossible for the present embodiment of poverty to express the freedom of wealth. It is useless to put old wine into new bottles or new goods into old dresses. They are both lost. And yet, as we see the urge in the egg, we know that nothing is amiss with the desire to fly over the great open spaces with wings of an eagle. When we feel the urge of man for heaven, happiness, abundance, and all the lovely things which rest within, we know likewise that nothing is amiss with this feel. But to bring it into manifestation, we must have a new embodiment. The shell of conscious thinking must be cracked. The bucket of water must be emptied into the sea. Life confined in the little body must be freed into the universal. Losing the human sense of anything is the means of finding it, for you are only losing a bondage in order to gain a new state. A chick must lose its shell, or that very shell which was its protection becomes its bondage. The egg must be absorbed into the bird. Nothing is lost or wasted except the breaking of the shell, the rending of the conscious thinking. Jesus soon found that he could do nothing with the limitations of Jesus, and so he said, I can of myself do nothing. If Jesus, the greatest way shower we have ever known, found that he could do nothing, then why will you persist in attempting to do things? Anything that is separated from the whole begins to go down in quality. The moment we first begin this separation, we were ushered, self-ushered, out of the garden, and we have been going down in quality steadily ever since. We have gone from the loaf to the half-loaf to the slice, and presently we are the dogs under the table of life, picking up the crumbs. Awake, thou that sleepest, and Christ shall give thee light. Awake and see what has happened to your voice. It has been stopped down to the narrow limitations of the human life and speaks of itself and speaks a lie. It keeps making one compromise after another until it finally has to admit that it is defeated. At no time can it speak with authority of itself, because it has no power to do so. Jesus, finding this out early, abandoned the idea that he could of himself do anything. When we find this out, we find wisdom, and we turn from the teaching of man and do a right about straight into the consciousness of the God-Spake power. We're queuing it up really well this morning. It is pitiful to see so-called truth students qualifying everything they say. The practice of knocking on wood is not unknown to many of them. They are afraid to speak with authority because of the awful knowledge of the weakness of their word, which is as brittle as spun glass. They are afraid to speak in the first person and present tense because they know that the little personality is a liar and is not worthy of anything. Accordingly, they take refuge in false humility, unfitness, and unworthiness. A Uriah Heep rubbing his hands together in apparent holy submission, while his heart is flaming fiercely with revenge, resentment, jealousy, is an adequate picture of an unenlightened man. Thus does the pit of hell burn brightly in the knocker on wood, who cannot and dare not speak with authority because he speaks of himself. God spake, and it was done. That does not mean that it was nearly done, halfway done, or would be done if some little personality gave the word of approval. It was done. There is such an air of finality about the God-Spake, and such a glorious possibility for us to blend the voice into the true voice of letting the voice become single, so that the whole embodiment can be filled with power and authority. I can of myself do nothing. What an acknowledgement of weakness for a teacher and leader. Yeah. For a revelator to make. But tarry a moment, the same voice is speaking such soul-stirring words as arise and walk, and a crippled body leaps into glorious vitality and power, every muscle rippling with strength and life. And again, the voice. Open your eyes, and the sockets in which no eyes were ever known fill out with glorious organs of vision. There was apparently no knocking on wood, because there was nothing in this which made it necessary. When thy voice becomes single, thy whole body shall be filled with light. Stop talking of and about the thing once and for always, and speak the word. When thy voice becomes single, thy whole body shall be filled with light. What a glorious thing for you to contemplate. Are you ready to drop off the stupid idea of making yourself a glorified personality, proclaiming to the world the wonders of God seen through the glass darkly? No matter how grand you may be, and how much the world should recognize you, or how lowly and ugly and how the world should hate you, remember that Jesus charged it all off to nothing. I can of myself do nothing. Come out from among them and be ye separate. Come out from the beliefs that you have been hugging to yourself all these years and begin the life in the present tense, the here and now, the presence of the power, and the God-Spake voice will be your voice, and the word of authority will be yours. For I also am a man in authority. For something so glorious and deeply moving will come to you that the chatter of personalities about their accomplishments and doings will fall away, and you shall speak with the single voice, the word, the power and the glory. It is wonderful. Only speak the word. Imagine having that said unto you. No one can say it unto your little personality any more than he could have said it unto the Jesus personality. But the very same words were addressed to Jesus and can be addressed to you when you lose your life in the universal and can learn the God-Spake power that lies within you, awaiting your recognition. I will, no more, no less. And yet, what a world of glorious manifestation came through. No checking to see, no looking about to find results, because before the word was spoken, the eternal wellness or wholeness of all God's creatures was established. When thy voice becomes single, thy whole body shall be filled with light. It was just this light, this voice, that drew all men unto it. What is the good asking a carpenter to perform that which a physician should do, or vice versa? you must answer, no good. And so is it with you. What is the good of asking you to do something which you are not capable of doing? No personality is capable of healing anything, because all personality is under the law of when I would do good, I do evil, and is described as a broken reed, something to avoid. Yet people go on leaning on the broken reeds of personality. Awake, thou that sleepest. Awake and arise from the dead, thoughts and beliefs. Dare you to use the voice? Dare you to speak the word? Not you, and yet you. From one angle, it would only be guesswork, hoping, wishing and beseeching, and from the other, it would be done before it was spoken. Be still and know that I am God does not refer to the small measure of life shut away in your body, but the universal life which can only be found when you lose the personal life you have been so vainly holding and protecting all these years. The very voice which says it does not believe in evil has to protect itself from that evil. And so it goes on until, like a cat chasing its tail, it falls in its track and dies of futility. Free me. Free me. Break down the narrow confines of the screeching voice of the personality and let it be lost in the velvety overtones of the presence, so filled with that something that it brings into manifestation what the eyes have not seen. Lost in this voice, you find yourself speaking with authority and immediately forgetting all about the belief that was to be overcome because of the coming into being of the presence. God spake and it was done can only come into being when we learn to let not the right hand know what the left hand doeth. And when we cease to think of the results and manifestation of the power as something unusual and unexpected. The God-Spake voice cannot be surprised when what it spake is accomplished. When the thing is already accomplished and done, the God-Spake voice is merely the breath which blows the thin gossamer of human belief away from the face of the truth of being. It blows away the net of human thoughts into which man has been enmeshed all the years he has known himself as apart from God. A glorious overtone of the soul shines through the voice, which differentiates it from the squeaking voice of man. The voice of the mimic can never speak with authority, though he be so perfect in his imitation that he fool the very elect. is only an imitation and has no power back of it. His word would not carry through in the world of the person he was imitating because it lacks authority or the something that makes it genuine. So man imitating Jesus does not do the works of Jesus, and saying the words of God does not do the works of God, and so on. It lacks the life substance or the authority which is hidden away in the God-Spake voice and is absent from the voice of man. When Jesus let go of the little voice of the carpenter and became the God-Spake voice, he spoke with authority. So is it with you, whoever you are. God spake and it was done, because the glorious power behind the veil of human limitations, when recognized, instantly establishes that which is done and gives it an embodiment. It is so near you. It is so possible to you when you lose the human voice and its limitation and blend the word with the Father word. You feel the deep inspiration of this voice, which is with you always, no matter where you go. When you are alone with me, then you will one day speak the word. The God-Spake word, and the bush on the wayside will burst into flame. No human knowledge could reason it out, measure it, or tell of its wonders, because it measures everything by the yardstick of personal knowledge. My sheep hear my voice. Just what do you mean? What is there in the voice which can be heard by my sheep? A great impersonator once stood with a friend in his garden. "Call your dog," he said. The dog came bounding across the spacious lawn to his master. "Now, then, send him away again and let me call him." Accordingly, a stone was thrown and the dog went to the far end of the lawn after it. The impersonator then called with a voice which was so nearly like his friend's that it would have been impossible for even his intimate acquaintances to have discerned the difference. The dog at the other end of the garden pricked up his ears, stood for a moment, turned his head on one side, and then, disregarding the voice, went further away to something that had attracted his attention. His master then called him again, whereupon he turned and came running towards him. There was something in the voice which had authority, which could, and automatically did, call the manifestation into being. My sheep hear my voice, because it is the voice of authority, and when the sheep hear the voice, they come. So is it with manifestation. When the God-Spake voice is used or spoken, the manifestation comes into being because it has that quality of authority which unveils and shows that which has been before you ask. It is wonderful to contemplate this glorious voice which Jesus discovered for us. God spake, and it was done. Only speak the word. I will. And that is the end of chapter 23. God-Spake.